Hi, my name is Melissa Garcia.
My name is Brooklyn Halsted.
And my name is Carolina Badillo. And our topic name is Revolutionary Suicide, led by cult leader Jim Jones. It was a cult that occurred in the 1970s in a time where civil rights were a very sensitive matter. This global phenomenon made headlines as People's Temple, where Jim Jones controlled the lives of thousands of people and still affects those today.
Jones began the People's Temple in 1950s as an independent congregation in Indianapolis. He was inspired by the idea of a society that could overcome the evils of racism and poverty. Although Jones was white, he attracted mostly African Americans with to the group with his visions of integrated congregation. In 1960, the People's Temple was affiliated with Christian Church, and 4 years later, Jones was ordained. In 1965, he warned of a nuclear holocaust and led the movement to California, where members were become active in both Protestant circles and state politics. Branches of congregations opened in San Francisco and Los Angeles. At its peak, the temple boasted 20,000 members and connections with many left-wing political figures. Jonestown was founded in 1974, but before forming the church, Jim Jones had become obsessed with communism and was frustrated by the harassment communists received in the United States. Jones was Marxist liberation theology, popular among the Latin America at the time. Although Jones feared the backlash of being a communist, he was surprised when a Methodist superintendent helped him into the church, despite his knowledge that Jones was a communist. He mixed social concerns with faith healing and an enthusiastic worship style drawn from the Black church. He also invited members to live communally in the efforts of realization of realize an effort to realize his Ethiopian ideal. Meanwhile, the church was accusing the press of financial fraud, physical mistreatment of members, and abuse of children in his care. Communication layered with both verbal and nonverbal layers. He was very charismatic and attracted people who were feeling vulnerable for whatever reason. Jones used psychological tactics to bring in people in his community. If you want a religion, Jones will give that to you. If you want a socialism, he can give that to you. If you were looking for a father figure, he'll be your father. He always homed in on what you needed and managed to bring you in emotionally. He was very passionate about interracial integration. The People's Temple built schools, housing, clinics, kitchen, and harvested crops. His goal was to set up an Ethiopian community where everything would be fair and equal.
Power is defined by the ability to influence someone's thoughts and behaviors. Jim Jones began obsessed with power at a very young age. When he was a child, he'd enjoy hurting and sometimes even killing animals and pets, allowing him to have the power to end life in the palm of his hands. His fascination then continued as he got older, obsessing over corrupt power such as Adolf Hitler. He loved the idea of being able to control millions of people. Jim Jones gained his following by fighting for civil rights and having a multiracial family, which was a huge deal in the 1970s. He gained people's trust in the church by performing fake healings. But little did people know it was a bunch of lies to feed his godlike ego. He wanted people to fall at his feet and worship him. So he would have his secretary dress up as someone with a spinal injury and attend church in a wheelchair. He would then bless her and command her to walk. When she did, people couldn't believe their eyes. Jones manipulated situations, which in turn manipulated influence. At some point, he convinced thousands of people to move from the States to Guyana to build a socialist utopia. Jones always gained seating arrangement power by being placed in the middle of the gatherings or in front of an altar where he was visible by all. Jones had a bit of all five power sources. Legitimate, because he was appointed and well respected. Referent, because many people loved and gravitated towards him. expert because he was very knowledgeable in his craft as well as in politics, reward because he gave some compensation to those who followed his orders, and coercive because he also indeed punished people if they chose not to follow his orders. Once Jones had established his following in Guyana, he made them sign blank pieces of paper in which he would then write anything above the signature, such as statements admitting people were thieves and rapists. He did this manipulation against people so he could blackmail them to never leave. The people were then overworked and underfed. In 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan flew to Guyana along with NBC News to investigate the situation. When Congressman left, he took 15 defectors with him. Jones then ordered them to be killed and sent gunmen their way. No one once questioned his command of action, as he was seen as a charismatic leader. In many cases, Jones represented all three leader personalities. Hero, because people wanted to be just like him. Anti-hero, because people related to him due to being sympathetic towards civil rights. And mystic, because people were drawn to his mysterious godlike persona. Overall, Jones was a very powerful individual and eventually caused the death of 900 people through a revolutionary suicide.
In the beginning, Jones set a welcome, supportive tone for people to join with open arms. He used holy healings, the idea of equality, rehabilitation centers, housing for the homeless, medical clinics, daycares, and senior citizen centers to appeal to the community. He gave people the belief in themselves and that the organization was doing something for the fellow man, and the people felt that they had freedom and acceptance, like they were valued and respected. After time, the tone started to change and turn defensive. He appealed to negatively affect members' self-concept by capturing their weaknesses to keep them in the congregation. After a group of ex-members added Jones and the organization for the inhumane way the members were treated, Jones started to get paranoid that the FBI was watching him. In 1973, Jones issued a suicide practice without the congregation knowing, saying it was laced with, that he laced the wine with arsenic, stating it was their protest against capitalism and to promote socialism. He wouldn't stop with just laced wine. He had the idea of having a group of members jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and committing suicide. He had another idea of a group of members boarding a plane and shooting the pilot in the head and crashing it. He used this as a form of questioning to see if his followers were true believers in him. Jones knew what was important to someone as well as what someone feared by just looking at them and how to exploit it in his members. In 1967, Jones took 50 people to Guyana in South America to start Jamestown, a so-called settlement for his congregation. He would make these videos that would promote Jamestown to his people back in the States. He would show how they had local bananas and that they were growing their own crops to sustain themselves, and how they raised their own livestock. Jones really showcased Jamestown as the piece of the promised land or heaven for his people to live in. In 1977, Jones and more than 1,000 temple members joined and moved to Guyana. However, Jamestown did not turn out to be the paradise their leader had promised. Temple members worked long days in the fields and were subjected to harsh punishments if they questioned Jones' authority. Their passports and medications were confiscated, and they were plagued by mosquitoes and tropical diseases. Members were encouraged to inform one another and were forced to attend lengthy and late-night meetings. Their letters and phone calls were censored. Temple members that had left the church, also known as defectors, protested in the States, wanting their families to come back home. As a result of the protest, Congressman Ryan went to check out the members of the People's Temple to see if the people were really being held against their will at Jamestown. As a result of the congressman coming to Jamestown, Jones became paranoid and called in the gunmen to surround them and to threaten the members. November 18, 1978, Jones ordered the gunman guards to box in the members in the main pavilion to commit what he called a revolutionary act. The first to die were the children. They were given syringes filled with cyanide, sedatives, and fruit juice, while the adults lined up to take the concoction while the armed guards watched them. 909 people died in the arms of each other, and a third of them were children. A total of 33 people survived, either because they ran into the jungle or they were away on business. The Guyanese officials found Jones sitting in a rocking chair with a single bullet wound in his head.
In conclusion to the massive suicide, we now see how the elements communication, power, and group climate influence how one person can have an enormous impact on both history and people. We have to ask ourselves, why did more than 1,000 people leave this country and go with Jim Jones to Guyana? Why did the people feel they'd rather live in the jungle than in California, Indianapolis, or whatever they were living? The American people were aghast at the revolutionary acts Jones led the People's Temple to perform. Jones was a revolutionary leader in the Black community to perform what soon known as the largest suicide in American history.